John, are you there? Hi, John.
Good morning, buenos dias.
Hello, how are you? How are you?
Good, thank you.
Welcome. I don't see you, but I can hear your voice. You're in
Okay, I'm on video, so
in the outer space.
strange voices from the internet.
So, John is in Hi, John. Nice to see you virtually. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I know you have a very busy schedule, but I met John here in Buenos Aires last year, and he said, I cannot do Brazil, north of Brazil, but I want to be present in your next school if my schedule allows it, and he has found a spot in his busy schedule. Today he's in Los Angeles, so it's morning there, right? So it's 4 hours less than here. So thank you very much. We have a very diverse group of students from here in the room from all Latin America, with quite important participation from Brazilian colleagues and all the rest of the countries, and virtually we have from all over the world. And just, I know that you will like this, on Tuesday we were awarded by a WSIS prize by the TU, the Telecommunications United Union. So we are very happy for that, and this is the 16th edition. And I was telling the fellows that you have installed internet servers in how many countries?
Many.
Say it. I know it's
I don't know.
Number. Many.
I mean,
all over the world. So thank you very much for being with us. Do you want us to show your presentation, or you want to?
I have it, I can control it.
So the floor is yours, and thank you again very much. And will you go to Kigali?
I will not. Unfortunately, I have other business elsewhere, so unfortunately I will not see you in Kigali.
Okay. We will meet in another meeting.
We will. Well, next time I have to get to Brazil, or back to Argentina.
Okay, welcome. And the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Well, firstly, congratulations on the award. I did see that on LinkedIn and various other places on the internet. Well deserved. Thank you, everybody, for giving me this time. I apologize that I do not speak Spanish. I have no excuse. Mi esposa es mexicano, so I should speak Spanish, but I don't. So I will go ahead in English. Okay, let's see if and now my slide is not changing. Oh, yes, it is. Just a little slow. So, I am John Crain. I am ICANN's Senior Vice President and Chief Technology Officer. The Office of the Chief Technology Officer inside ICANN is a small-ish group of people with an interesting mission. So you probably thought I was going to come and talk about ICANN policy forums and all the policy processes, but I suspect, being as this is a school on internet governance, that you've already heard plenty about that and would rather not hear any more. So what I will do is I will talk a little bit about some of the technical things, not just in the office of the CTO, but across ICANN, and some of the topics that we deal with. Definitely not a complete set of topics, because there are literally hundreds of projects and thousands of different things happening at ICANN, but I'll talk about some of the ones that either I personally find interesting or I think that you might find interesting. And I will try to finish in time to leave plenty of time for questions. So the Office of the CTO was set up really as a think tank. The ability to learn and share knowledge about the identifier systems, and you'll note I will often use the word identifier systems, not the domain name system, because while it is important, it is most definitely not the only identifier we use on the internet. And our job is to learn about these, to do discovery about new emerging technologies, etc., or the existing ones, and share that information with the broader community. So that's basically what my job is. I lead those efforts inside the organization. I also am responsible for the oversight of the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, which is part of ICANN, and I will get to that in a minute. So the first thing you need to know about ICANN is we are governed by bylaws. We're an organization. We have a set of bylaws, and those bylaws basically tell us what our mandate is and what we do. And some of the things I'll talk about are actually in those bylaws. So the URL that we have here, if you want to understand ICANN, first try and understand the bylaws themselves. I'm not going to go into the bylaws. I am not a lawyer. I would not do that to you. So, but basically what it says is that ICANN is dedicated to maintaining the security, stability, resilience of the internet's system of unique identifiers. There's that term again, not domain names, unique identifiers. And part of that is to promote the trust of the users in those systems, and where we can to strengthen those systems. So people will often talk about ICANN, and they will talk about the internet, and ICANN is responsible for the internet, but that's actually incorrect. What ICANN is responsible for is those unique identifier systems, the domain name system, IP addresses, and thousands of others. So what we're trying to do when we're dealing with security, stability, and resilience is promote an approach where we prevent issues, raising awareness of threats, trying to tackle those threats, mitigate threats through information. So we share a lot of information with the community, with security companies, with operators of the DNS or other identifier systems, routing, etc. We try and adopt and promote best practices in doing this. We do, especially in the Office of the CTO, we do a lot of analysis of data sets and looking at the ecosystem and trying to understand what is happening. And most importantly, we try and promote transparency and collaboration. The internet is built on trust, right? It is something that people have to trust if they're going to use it. So we try and live that, if you like. So I'm going to come back to this slide at the end as well. This one's important. This sort of tells you the core functions of what ICANN does. We coordinate the allocation of names and numbers. Right? So that's domain names, but it's also many IP addresses and also autonomous system numbers and many others. For the domain name space, we coordinate the development and implementation of policies. That's where the policy stuff comes in. So most of the policy work you will see at an ICANN meeting is about generic top-level domains and the DNS. And we facilitate some of the coordination of the operation of the root name server system. I'll come back to that in a little bit. And we also not just talk about names and numbers, but we also talk about protocol numbers, autonomous systems, routers. When I talk about the IANA, I'll talk a little bit more. And most importantly as well is we collaborate with other bodies. ICANN does not do this alone. We are not some oversight regulatory body that runs the internet. And you will see people make that mistake and think that ICANN does a lot of stuff it does not do. And we coordinate pretty much everything we do with many of our partners in the ecosystem. The internet is a network of networks, and even the governance of, for example, the identifier systems is not done by one organization. It is done across the internet by many organizations. And you'll have heard of some of these organizations. You'll see some of them on the sponsorship list for this very conference you're at. So we have what we call our technical partners. These are people that really do have a lot of work in the development and the distribution of protocols and parameters. You see, I don't know if we see LACNIC on here. Yes, there we do. LACNIC is down near the bottom. That's a regional internet registry for Latin America and the Caribbean. You'll also see there's one in Europe. You'll see ourselves on there. You'll also see organizations like the Internet Engineering Task Force, the root server operators, W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium. So there are a lot of different organizations that are involved in this. It's not purely an ICANN thing. There's many, many organizations that help to make the internet run. And this is just a small portion of them. If I was to put everybody on this slide, we need a screen 5,000 feet wide. There are so many people involved. And we work with other organizations that you may be less familiar with if you're in the governance circle. The Anti-Phishing Working Group, we are a member. They are working against phishing. The Internet Governance Forum we participate in. We get involved with WIPO. Obviously, the Internet Society, one of the sponsors of this organization. So there are a lot of partner organizations, our colleagues and our peers in this world that we work with. Let me talk about some of the things that ICANN works on. Some of the tasks, if you like, that ICANN does. So here's an overview of some of them, and I'm going to go into some of them in a little more detail. Obviously, we talked about the DNS, the domain name system, and the policy development that goes with that. IMRS, I will come back to this, the ICANN Managed Root Server. A lot of support for growing the community. We have things like fellowships programs and next-gen programs, and we try and introduce a lot of newcomers into our policy forums. But we also do a lot of education and capacity building outside the ICANN meetings with others that we would like to see more active in the ecosystem. I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm going to skip down. So I'm going to talk about the first one, the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. So I don't know how many of you have heard of this organization, but this function, this registry of protocols, etc., actually predates ICANN. The IANA was part of the discussion of why ICANN was founded 25 years ago. It was founded in many ways to provide a home for this function and for a place where we could have a multi-stakeholder international discussion about the policies for things like the DNS. So this is a really critical function, if not the most critical function, in my opinion, of what ICANN does. So we have an affiliate called PTI. It's a legal construct, but you could think of this as a department within inside the organization. The department reports up to me, and they keep databases. Basically, that's what they do. They keep thousands of databases that enable us to have a single correct registry of various protocol parameters. The most commonly known one of those is, of course, the domain name system. You may have heard of the root zone. You could think of the root zone as a database. It is a file with a set of characters, a set of data that point to particular objects, those objects being TLDs. So they have information about the top level domains. IP addresses are kept in databases. IANA distributes IP addresses to the regional internet registries who distribute them to their member ISPs. So we are the central record for the top level of that data. We give that data out in what we call /8s in version 4 and in even bigger chunks in IP version 6. And then there are literally thousands of other registries of parameters that we use on the internet that in some way have an element of uniqueness that is needed for them to function. One you might not think of, but we use every day, is what we call a port number. When you go to a website, you don't just go to an IP address. You also, once you get to that server, go to a particular port or a particular service on that machine. Now, port 80 and port 443 are used for web services, one encrypted, one non-encrypted. That piece of information that those ports are used for that service needs to be registered somewhere. IANA has a page with a list of what all the port numbers are for. It's basically a database. And so on for literally thousands of other parameters. These parameters, for the most part, come from the Internet Engineering Task Force. They are written in request for comments documents, and your average user never sees them, does not really need to know about them, but they are essential for ensuring that the internet as we know it works, that it works in a predictable manner, and that we have a single interoperable internet. So that is, in a nutshell, what the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority does, and that work happens at ICANN. So basically, they are the record keeper of all those unique names. And as I said, it goes back a long way before ICANN existed. I think I talked about most of these. One of the functions that happens between IANA and ICANN staff is the signing of the DNS root. If you've heard anything about DNSSEC, or DNS security extensions, and you know about cryptographically signing domain zones, that starts at the DNS root. And we hold regular ceremonies 4 times a year where we generate keys for signing the root. And this is a rather bizarre ceremony, because when you think about things like generating cryptographic keys, you think that this is all things that is done hush hush in a secret room somewhere. But on the contrary, because we want the users and the operators to trust that these keys are generated in the correct way, everything is done in that transparent manner that ICANN lives by. So you can watch, if you have a lot of time and extreme patience and a strange penchant for watching ceremonies, very long ceremonies, you can actually watch the KSK ceremony live. You could even visit and actually go there and watch it in person. It is a day-long ceremony, and it is extremely tedious by design. Every element of that ceremony is checked and cross-checked and verified to make sure that the keys used for signing the root are generated in a safe and secure manner. When it comes to the root, I said I'd mention IMRS. We love initializations and acronyms at ICANN. Well, IMRS stands for the ICANN Managed Root Server, sometimes also referred to as LRoot or L.root-servers.net, because those are the identifiers that it is associated with. Now, there are 13 of these root servers, or these root server designations in the world, and they are key to the operation of the internet. They are core DNS infrastructure, and without them, we cannot find IP addresses because the DNS would not work. Now, you can find out about all of these root servers and their operators at the URL I'm giving here, which is www.root-servers.org. So that just leads to a website with a lot of data, or about the ICANN managed root server, which is on the URL given. Now, we have machines in a little over 190 locations spread across more than 80 countries around the world. Other root server operators may have similar infrastructure. The root servers are not a machine in a rack somewhere. They are often a distributed network of servers that are responding around the world using a technology that allows us to replicate these machines in other places. So we actually operate one of those root servers. A lot of people don't know that we are actually doing that. I've personally been involved in operating root servers predating ICANN because I was involved at the RIPE NCC in Europe, but certainly for 3 decades. And these are very important machines, and it's a very heavy responsibility to actually manage one of these. So we take this very seriously, put a lot of resources into it, and we have them, as I said, spread in more than 80 countries across the world. I want to talk about a topic that gets a lot of discussion in the ICANN world, and that's DNS abuse. So this is a terminology that will have different meanings, whether you're inside ICANN, outside ICANN, often based on individual opinions or different groups. But inside the world of ICANN and the ICANN policy world, we've agreed on a base definition of 5 categories of harmful use of domain names that we consider to be inside the remit of ICANN. This could change over time, but this is where we are today. Botnets. What we mean there is when domain names are registered for the control or the command and control of botnet infrastructure. These are the large networks of machines that are infected with malware and used by organized crime and criminals to attack other people, whether that's for phishing or DDoS or whatever they're using it for. Now, they often control these using domain names because most things on the internet use domain names. But what they will do is they will randomly generate those names using dates and times, etc., and generate lists of sometimes hundreds of thousands of names that they could use in the future. And registries sometimes block those names, often in conjunction with requests from law enforcement or security researchers, so that the bad guys cannot control their botnets and cause harm. Malware is, of course, that malicious software that is not only used for botnets, but used to cause harm to users in many other ways, infecting your machine. Ransomware is a type of malware you might think of. If the name is being used specifically to drop malware onto people's machines or used in malware in some way, and by disrupting it, we can prevent the malware from working, then that's considered a DNS abuse. Farming and phishing. Farming is a little bit harder to tackle via the DNS because it often refers to attacks against recursive resolvers. So there's not really a lot that registries can always do there. But if a name is used for that, they may remove it, or a registrar. Phishing, I think we're all familiar with. I think everybody here has at least been attempted to be phished at some point. If names are registered for the purpose of phishing and being used for that, they can also fall into this category. And we mentioned spam, but it's really only when it's used as a mechanism for delivery of the 4 previous mentioned things. So spam that is like commercial advertising, etc., does not fall into this category. An important thing to remember and I'd go back to the bylaws because this is spelt out very specifically in the bylaws. ICANN does not regulate online content. And we do not even have the ability to remove content. And frankly, neither do many of the people in the DNS industry. The registries and the registrars also do not have that capability. But that is often misunderstood by people, that they think if something is on the internet, then it's easy for somebody in the DNS world to do something about it. And it's not always the case. These limitations don't stop us from studying or aiding in the mitigations of some of these things, especially when they touch on DNS abuse. But ICANN will not make policy or contractual obligations around content because it is explicitly forbidden within our bylaws. So once again, I would recommend you read the bylaws. They're not that long. So how do we deal with DNS abuse at ICANN, both in the organization and the community? Well, there's not one answer. We have a very wide program on this. The org I talked about providing data, providing information. We do this around DNS abuse. If we have tools we can provide, enforcing contractual obligations, and I'll go a bit more into that in a minute. I'm going to go through these slides fairly quickly. So we have tools that measure the reputation of the DNS, not really measuring the abuse, but the actual reputation of what people are saying is being abused. Currently, we have something called DAR. We're working on a new tool that will come out in the next year called Metrica, which will be much more sophisticated. There is a research project. We are funding this. We are not doing the work ourselves, called Informal. So there's a lot of analysis that needs to happen of what is happening in the DNS and the ecosystem. So ICANN can get involved in that either by doing research or funding research. The Informal project, which is being run out of a university in France, is aiming to systematically analyze preferences of attackers. So could be things like, what type of names do attackers like to register? Where do they like to register them? Where do they like to host them? Which is, of course, that itself is outside ICANN's purview, but it is an interesting piece of information that may help the community take action or decide things or decide not to do things. But our job here is to promote the information. We have done some mitigation. We have something with a really long name that we call DNS sticker, domain name security threat information collection and reporting. Basically what this does is it takes reports, reputational or otherwise, of abuse. It takes string analysis. It looks at specific strings related to current threats. And then it goes and looks at those names to see, are they resolving? What kind of threat is actually sitting behind that domain name? And if we find evidence of abuse, we report it. So we would send that to a registrar or a registry, depending on what it is. And we would say, hey, we found this. Here is the evidence. Please take a look at it. And typically, I would say in almost 100% of the cases, the registry or the registrar will then take action to prevent that name from resolving because we give them solid evidence about what is happening there. We also, of course, provide subject matter expertise. We participate in many cybersecurity groups, and we offer capacity development. We train law enforcement, judiciary, work with ISPs, whoever we need to, so that they understand how the ecosystem works and how they can interact with the ecosystem to combat DNS abuse. And there's a list of a sort of a course catalog on our website. Hopefully not going too fast. And of course, ICANN doesn't do this together on its own, so we work with the registries and the registrars. Now, recently, about a year and a half ago, I think it was, time flies, the registries and the registrars, or the contracted parties as we often refer to them because they have contracts with ICANN, actually came to us and said, can we increase the requirements in our contracts? So prior to these contractual changes, which are now in place, it's actually was a really fast negotiation by ICANN standards and very collaborative with the industry. It now has a clear contractual obligation for registries and registrars to mitigate and disrupt DNS abuse. That might seem like an obvious thing to have in the contracts, but it wasn't there before. And the registries identified this and came to us, and together we changed the contracts. That then allows us to enforce our contracts. So going forward, given evidence, and that is really important, given evidence, remember I talked about DNS sticker, that when we give them evidence, they can take action. Given evidence, they are obligated to mitigate that DNS abuse. That does not mean that if somebody sends them an email and says, hey, there's DNS abuse here, that they're going to mitigate it, because that is not evidence. That is just somebody pointing at something. But of course, we will be able to enforce that and see whether or not registries and registrars are taking these actions. And of course, we'll be able to measure that and see whether or not this policy has an overall effect on the ecosystem. And we still, and this is really important, we still believe that on DNS abuse, the community is best positioned to determine what policy needs to be in place here. As ICANN.org, you could see us as the secretariat. We don't make the policies. That's the job of the community. So I expect there will be a lot of discussion in the ICANN fora about what next on DNS abuse. Do we need more policy? Do we not? If we do, what does that look like? I left a blank space here on purpose. So that's the bulk of some of the things we're doing. Now, we are doing many more technical things at ICANN, like many, many more. We have so many projects. And of course, we're doing all the policy work. But going back to this slide that I showed earlier, this is the basis of why ICANN does things and the kind of things we do. Based on our core requirement to ensure the security and stability of the DNS and the identifier systems, this is the kind of work that ICANN does that you may actually not know about, because we don't talk as much about some of the work we do as we do about the policy. And that's why I decided that today I'd open up for discussions about all the kinds of things that ICANN does. If you need to talk to us in person, we do have a global presence. We have people in, I think the closest office that we have is Uruguay. We have a small office in Montevideo in the Casa de Internet. If you're ever in Uruguay, you should visit. There are lots of those partner organizations in the same location. It's a fantastic place with a lot of good work happening. And we actually have at least one staff member in Brazil, and multiple staff members around the Latin American region. So I think with that, if I may, Olga, I would like to open up to questions from the audience, or from yourself, of course.
First, applause to John. Do we have questions for Sean? Okay. First, let me ask you, I have seen these pictures of the roots ceremony. There are members of the community there. How do you get there? I mean, how do you get the invitation? Or is it a place to go and visit and put your name on?
So there are different levels of participation. There are people that we consider trusted community members that get selected. They put their names forward themselves, and staff do an evaluation, like, are these people known? Often they will put forward references and say, hey, all these people know me. Most of these people are actually known entities in the internet networking community or the policy world. So those are our sort of trusted players. And they are financed by the program to come. They fly in. We don't need everybody. We actually don't want everybody because from a security standpoint, you don't bring everybody together at the same time. But you can also, should you so wish, which I would think would be a rather strange hobby, you just ask if you can come, and you need to work with our staff who arrange this to make sure you have the right security credentials, which is basically as vetting you and making sure that you can, you can get in there because it's in a secure environment, and we will let you come and watch.
Okay.
Personally, I would rather watch it online because then I can have a cup of coffee while I'm watching. It really is tedious. But if you're a security person and you want to see this kind of event up close, as close as you can get, because obviously if you're not in the trusted list of community members, you can't actually get behind the cage for obvious reasons, then you can just ask and we will figure out if we can get you the credentials to get into the building. We want this to be as transparent as possible. But it does take at least a full day.
Okay.
And we've had ceremonies that are 2 days long. And it's a lot of checking things on lists.
Okay. Where is that located, in Los Angeles?
There is one key management facility in Los Angeles and one on the East Coast near Reston.
Okay.
So that they're thousands of miles apart by design, but you can actually get to them on like by car if you have to, or by walking in theory, also by design. So they're on the same landmass, but they are thousands of miles apart.
Okay, we have one question here. I translate.
Okay. ¿Cuáles serían las actividades o cómo estaban apoyando a ICANN?
How are you supporting ICANN with the ISPs in order to support the implementation of good practices when managing DNS, especially in the small and medium-sized ISPs? ISPs.
Internet providers group, especially focusing on small ISPs. That's one question.
Okay. So there's two ways we can work on this, and two ways we do work on it. One is through training programs. So inside ICANN, we have a lot of staff who are what we call engagement specialists. In my team, we have a series of specialists, including one based in Montevideo, that we call technical engagement specialists. And they can go out and they can train groups. So they're not likely to go to a single individual ISP. They would normally go to, for example, a network operators group or an ISP association. And they can train on various aspects that are related to what ICANN does. How to deploy DNSSEC, RPKI, routing issues, things like that. The other thing we do is specific to implementation of DNS is we have a program called Kindness. Now, if you work at an ISP, then you may be familiar with something called Manners from our friends at ISOC. Now, Manners is about best practices and norms for how you do routing. Kindness is about how you do similar things for the DNS. And it's at Kindness, that is kindns.org. And there are a bunch of things that you can go there and you can actually run yourself through some tests to see if your DNS is following a base set of best current practices.
Thank you, John. ¿Más preguntas para John? ¿No? Ok, otro aplauso para John.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if any of my colleagues are there, but reach out to them and pester them if you have questions.
No, I managed to send you the questions if there are many.
Okay.
Remota no tenemos ninguna. Ah, okay. That was the one that we did in Spanish and translated was from a remote participant. So thank you, John. Have a nice weekend. I hope to see you somewhere in the world in this year.
I'm
maybe.
sure we will. I'm sure we will
Okay.
meet somewhere,
Bye.
Olga.
Many
Thank you. And
thanks.
I hope to meet some of the participants in person. Maybe next year I can make it in person.
Okay,
That would be
okay.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you so
everybody.
much. Bye. Ciao, ciao. Ciao.